Okay, this is Mr. Peterson. Welcome to the Project Foundry training for all NLRA student parents, guardians, and coaches. The first thing I want to do is I just have Google as a browser. One thing with Project Foundry right off the bat, it's recommended that you use Google Chrome as your browser as opposed to Internet Explorer or Mozilla. Google Chrome things are going to work the best with, so I suggest getting on Chrome. The website you're going to log into is nlra.projectfoundry.org/coach. Basically, this is going to bring you to a login screen. Now, your student has, for example, their website is the exact same thing. Instead of coach, it says student, and the only difference is it's a different color, and when they log in, they see something pretty different. So I created what I'm calling a sample coach account. And there's a username and password. Now in the email, the second email that was sent to all parents and guardians, your username and password should be your student's computer login followed by the word coach. So if, for example, your student was Sam Smith, it is their last name, Smith, S-M-I-T-H, and then the first three letters of their first name, so S-A-M, so Smith, Sam, and then the word coach. The username and password are the exact same to start out with, and that's just how we set it up to be easier. So again, I'll kind of go back to that. So for example, it's your student's login to their computer. That's their last name, and then the first three letters of their first name, and then the word coach. So the username and password should be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and log into that. If you have any issues with the username and password, please contact Mr. Peterson. But more than anything, it could just be if you struggle with that idea of their last name and first three letters of their first name. Sometimes spellings are different in Skyward, the official system that the district has set up. You'd want to talk to your student, but just their computer login followed by the word coach for username and password. One thing we recommend is once you get into this, what we call the coaches screen up here, you can, this is where you log out, but this is where you can also change your password. So very strongly recommended that you change that password to something that you're not going to forget right away. So you can't change the username, but you could change the password. The coaches site. Now, instead of calling this a parent or a guardian site, we call it a coaches site because I think over time this is going to evolve a great deal in terms of how we can use it. We see parents and guardians as coaches, just like their advisors are in their projects. But a coach also could be a community member. So at some point, a coach could be somebody who's monitoring one of your students' projects as an outside mentor. It doesn't necessarily have to be just a parent or a guardian. Right now, we're using it just with parents and guardians. But over the next couple of years, we'll see, because this Project Foundry can do a lot of things, and we're just kind of starting to get into everything, so we want to keep it as simple as we can. Now, one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make my screen just a little bit bigger so we can kind of see things a little bit more clearly here. What you're going to see is a lot of information, but your student's name, for example, this is sample student 1, but your student's name should appear here. If you have more than one student at NLRA that you're mentoring or that you're a parent or guardian to, there'll be a selection and you'll see both their names here. I'll kind of show you an example of that in a little bit. When you look at this screen, I want you to notice a couple of things. First of all, I already showed you where to change your password, how to log out. But along the top, if you ever get lost, I always say go home. So your home screen is what we're on now, but if you ever get lost from there, just hit the home button. It'll take you back to here. The first thing you're going to see is this chart up at the right. Now what this chart is there's two bars. And right now only one bar is going to be completely active. And that is your student's credits. As we've said many times, there's 28 credits to graduate from high school at NLRA. And this is going to keep basically progress of how close they are to that goal.
So I can tell you right now, for example, that sample student one is a sophomore, and so they are more than a fourth through. They're probably more like 30% done, which is exactly where we want them to be. So um, right now, this is just kind of a very simple diagram of how much credit has your student earned versus that 28 credit requirement. The second bar is not active at the time moment. In the next couple of weeks, it should be active, and that's going to say the learning targets. For graduation here, there are certain learning targets that your students have to hit, have to show proficiency in. And those learning targets are mostly going to be in English, science, social studies, health, things that are really state requirements. Right now, your students have earned learning targets. This bar isn't active just from a glitch in the system that we're kind of working out. So in the next week or so, that bar should be active, but right now you're not going to be able to see it. Um, so if you want to get a big picture of where your student is in terms of how close to graduation, how are they progressing the way they should be, then you'd see this. Right here is more of a day-to-day, and I will be honest here. Project Foundry has so much information. We can get very, very detailed here. Um, but on a day-to-day basis, one of the things we ask students to do is log their time. Now, we've kind of, as we've learned over the last 6 or 7 weeks, we're really at this point just asking students to log time for their own projects. If they're in a teacher-led project like a seminar or a workshop, which meets regularly, or in an online course like Alex, which logs its time anyway, we're not worried so much that they're logging time for that. It's anything else when it's a student-directed or a small group project. They always have to, at the end of the day, log their time. So you can see this student um, on a day-to-day basis with the date, exactly what time they spent doing different things. You can, again, if I scroll down, this just gives a couple days views, but you can, for example, search all of their time logs much more detailed ways um, there. So if I got to this screen, I can always go home and I get back to that other screen. The other thing we ask students to do every day is they write a journal. And so every day that they're in school, you should see that the student has written some sort of journal. And you can look at more in depth at what those journals are. For example, there's always 3 key questions we ask. What did you accomplish today in your Alex courses? What independent work tasks do you have to finish prior to school tomorrow? Meaning, like, what kind of homework do you have? And what are 3 concrete goals you will need to work on tomorrow during the school day? So, for example, this student only put 1, but the day before they put 2. So on a day-to-day basis, if a good way, if you're asking your student what they did or want to check up on them, you should look at this journal real brief. You can use the search bar here. You can look for journals over a long range of period. So I'm going to go back home. So again, whenever you get somewhere you're confused, just go home. So again, time logging, journals, kind of overall big picture view. Now, what we think, because we're a project-based school and all of the students' learning is coming from different projects, whether those are seminars and workshops led by teachers or online courses or projects that they're initiating or small group projects that are being mentored. Um, I think the most important thing of Project Foundry is down here. So for example, you see some different symbols here. And if you see a check mark, for example, this was It's My Life. That was the health-based wellness seminar that most of our students took place in the first 6 weeks of the year. And you can see that that's been completed. The check mark means that's done. Now the cool thing is you can kind of get a big picture of um, uh, if you go to the view project summary or view project request form, if you click on that, it's going to lead you to quite a bit of information. But the results tab is essentially this student has different results. So for example, their English results form. The English results form, uh, they have a link to a Google Doc. So this was a paper that they wrote that you could read that paper if you link there. If I go back, um, this student also, as part of that seminar, did a thing on drugs, and it looks like um, there is a video. This was a mocking video they did, so they were showing it looks like a student is smoking, and that's not what's happening. They're actually talking about the dangers of smoking in that video. So that's um, where that's going. But you can actually watch that video and watch their project. Um, so the cool thing about Project Foundry is it really shows you what the students are completing. What projects are they doing? How are they showing the proficiency? So it's not really just about getting a grade. It's really about what's the end product that they're creating. They always have to have evidence uploaded to here. So I'm going to go back to the home menu. So again, you'll see the projects associated here. So any checkmark project, for example, those have been completed. Here's a project this student has that, if you look over here, it was approved. And it looks like the reason why there's a question mark is they had set a date that this would be done, and they're past that date. So that's why that question mark. So technically the goals they set to finish this student's late on that. These projects are all current projects that have been approved by a teacher that are going. So for example, this student is doing a cooking video regarding Benjamin's house. They're in a podcasting, video casting workshop. They're in a heroes seminar. Um, they're in Mr. Peterson's advisory. And then they have a special event for Benjamin's house that they're working on. They also have another project. You see this little arrow, and if I go look over to the right, it says it's requested, meaning it hasn't been approved yet. It's been sent through a form to their advisor, and their advisor hasn't yet approved it. So it looks like it was just proposed on Friday. So this week at some point, I'm guessing their advisor will go and approve that. Or if they don't approve it, they send it back, and the student has to go make modifications. Now, the nice thing, again, too, is this menu will show you kind of all the projects that the student has either done, that are currently going, or that are in the works. This link right here is tasks. And the tasks are essentially day-to-day things that the student needs to do. Now, a better way to see tasks on a daily basis is actually up at the top here. So if I go back to just my home screen, I'm going to kind of go along the top now. So the first thing is my calendar. Now the students, on a daily basis, they enter tasks, and the tasks appear on a calendar. And this can be narrowed by a week or even by a day. So say, for example, Monday the 27th. This student right now only has one task that's showing. Whereas the next day, it looks like they have a podcast for part one of their project that they have to play the class. Now, if they click on that, um, it kind of gives you some more information on that task. So on a day-to-day basis, the best way to see what tasks your student has to do would be on this calendar um, menu. So some of these, and then students can, some of those tasks are made by teachers, some of those tasks are made by the students themselves. It really depends on the type of the project. As we go kind of along the top, the next tab, which will give you far more information than you'd probably ever need to know or want to know, but it's all here, and that's called the performance. So if you go on the performance overview, what that's going to do is give you a better breakdown of where your student is towards graduation, as well as, how are they doing. So everything we grade as teachers, we grade learning targets, and they're all on a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 being the best and 1 being the worst, essentially. Or so what our motto is C or better. So when you think of, if you want to think of grades, which most parents are traditionally think of grades, 5s are like A's, 4s are B's, 3s are C's. Um, if your student has 2s or 1s, those aren't going to count for credit, meaning we'll mark 2s and 1s as a project the student did, but in terms of if the student gets 1 and 2, they're not going to get credit for those types of grades. That they might be asked to redo it, they might ask to show it. That's not going to cut it. So 3s or better on learning targets is what you should be seeing. So you can kind of estimate, if you really wanted to, that this student has more B's than A's, and so they're probably an A-B student essentially. Um, but we can get much more detailed than we might ever need to. So for example, if I scroll over this, it can tell you exactly this student's earned 8.10 of 28 credits. If I click on this bar, it's going to bring me to a search engine where I can, for example, uh, find the student's name and just maybe for their English targets, and I want to know what English targets have they already completed. And I want to know in detail what those targets were. And so that's going to not only tell you, what was the English target um, here, but it's going to have a link back to the project where they did it, and include, you could even actually go to the results and look at the results, as well as kind of the overall grade or level on that target, 5, 4, 3 that they got. So this is kind of where that. So you could student go by any subject. So if we went to Phi Ed, for example, for this student, because we just did in It's My Life, this was a health-based seminar, and so for the health class, this students earned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of those required targets, the student had a 3 or better. It looks like they mostly had 5s or 5s and 4s, so kind of B plus average there. So again, lots and lots of information here. So I always say, if you ever get lost, let's go back home. Where am I at? On the home screen, I can go across the top. So there was my calendar, and here's my performance again. So we were just at the overview. Now, if you want some sort of unofficial transcript, what you can do is click on View Transcript. In fact, we can go even more detailed than that. But this allows you to kind of generate an idea of a grade point average, a running grade point average, and the grades your students receiving kind of on your own. Now, we want to make this clear. Project Foundry is really about managing projects and learning targets. We use Skyward with the school district, and what happens at semester, which is in the end of January, and then again at the end of the school year, any time that in a course the student has either basically a half a credit, except for math we wait till because it's online where they finish the whole course. We transcribe credit in a grade, and that official transcript is always going to be through the school district. So anything that's generated here is not exact. This is a unofficial GPA. It's going to be pretty close, but there's sometimes some rounding differences. We use this to report to the high school. But the Skyward, I should say the school district, the Skyward system is what is official in terms of a GPA. Project Foundry is not an official GPA calculating thing. So um, now, because of that, again at the end of January and again at the end of the school year, that's when we send home a transcript of where your student currently lies, like a paper copy of that that's issued from Skyward and not from Project Foundry, so that you can see. But what this lets us do is really get us a really good idea of where your student's at. So for example, you can generate a transcript. So you're going to only have the student's name here option, or if you have more than one student, you can click on them. I want to know just for this year, for semester 1, how are they doing? And I'm going to go ahead and generate that transcript. And it's going to kind of pop up down below here. There it goes. And then if I click on it, it's going to give me a PDF form that I can open up. And I'll make that a little bigger so we can actually see it. And you see there's different areas like core electives and English and general electives and Phi Ed and science and social studies. So it looks like, yeah, that student, mostly 4s and 5s, it looks like they have about a 3.4 GPA, somewhere around there. And it looks like they've earned so far this year about 3.10 credits. Now some of that is credit from last year that was entered in that has been untranscribed. So this kind of gives you that breakdown. Now again, I want to say it's an estimated grade point average. Official GPAs are calculated by the school district. So lots of information here. Now I want to show you how to run a couple other reports. So I always like to go back to the home menu. Performance, we saw transcript. You could also just view other types of reports. So for example, if you just wanted to know for your student um, what English learning targets they still need to hit, or that they've already shown. then what you can do is hide the ones they haven't done already, show the descriptions, summarize by subject group, and show total credits earned for this sample student. You can even set a date period if you wanted to, and I could generate a report. Takes a second. It's going to make a PDF here in a minute, and there we go. If I click on it, um, and it gives you a very, very detailed list of, in the different areas, how much credit they've earned, as well as on the courses, how many targets they've shown. In English, for example, the English targets are mandatory. The student so far is at 7 of 40. The advanced topics in English, 1 of 1. World history, the students hit all of their world history targets. And it kind of gives you an estimate of their grade and what their GPA would be for that particular area. So lots and lots of information. Um, Again, you could also, in this performance, you could just search for learning targets. Okay, if a student wanted to know for your student, so this is sample student 1, um, if they wanted to show just what the English targets are and the ones they haven't attempted or completed, and click target detail, um, then what that's going to do is say that English 910, these are different things that the students incorporate into their projects in terms of what we're assessing as their teachers. So and you could even print reports out of this stuff. Project Foundry is extremely robust, and we know, don't feel overwhelmed if you look at this screen and there's so much going on. My advice is start with a general overview before you dig deeper. And if there's information that you want to know that's very, very specific, just start digging deeper into those performance reports. We are here to help you. The first contact would be Mr. Peterson if you need help kind of generating some sort of report on your own. But we wanted to give you the power to be able to do this at home on your own as opposed to having to wait for us to do it. And this is what it allows us to do. We know there's a large learning curve. Don't feel intimidated. Just start with this general overview and start with, I want to know what my student's doing on a day-to-day basis. Then just go to their calendar and looks like it's taking a second to load, and just kind of look at their tasks on a day-to-day basis. Now, the students, I will say this, are learning how to use Project Foundry. We knew the first semester here, there's a huge learning curve, and they're getting better at it, but I'd say the first 6 weeks, it really was a learning experience for all of them. So there's stuff that we thought, they probably don't need to enter, where there's other stuff that they're not quite entering. So it is a process, and it's going to get clearer and clearer. If you ever want to know just, if a student doesn't have any tasks here, that might be, that's a concern. You would be like, well, gosh, why don't you have any tasks there? That probably means, well, it means one of two things. They're not logging their tasks, or it means they're not using their time well. So that's all discussion starters. So kind of going back to the home screen. This is, again, meant to get started, kind of dig deeper in here. If there's something more specific, please let Mr. Peterson know.